Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 29th of October, 2016, and we have a few questions we're going to address this week. And then also, if we have time, I will talk a little bit about a recent episode that I published on YouTube for kind of my main channel, talking about production versus post-production a little bit. So let's get to the questions. First of all, Eddie Jackson. Good day, Curtis. Many thanks for your excellent online content and expertise. You've got a great teaching style personality. Thank you, Eddie. My question relates to sound design and layering of audio tracks for enhancing projects. Specifically, as a freelance multimedia reporter, I want to capture and record not only the people being interviewed, but perhaps even more importantly, the context and the environment they're in. To add to the narrative, I want to enhance the video with audio that has rich layers of sound to try and make the content more compelling. By this, I mean improving the story by adding evocative and emotional elements and adding additional value to the production through mixing audio tracks. Typically, when working solo, I use two Nikon D800s with a Zoom H5, wireless lavalier, and a Rode NT2 mic. Editing is via Adobe Creative Cloud with Audition and Premiere. On some projects, a videographer supports with a third camera. In summary, what is your advice on enhancing the quality of the audio by mixing and layering a number of tracks? Eddie, that's a question that really relates to mixing and sound design a bit more than we've talked about. Mainly what we've talked about is recording and post-processing dialogue audio. So this is kind of taking it to the next level. And I would say that it's a pretty deep topic. There's a lot to cover, and I'm not an expert at this topic. I've done some mixing, but let me tell you the main idea. The main thing that kind of the main approach I take when I'm mixing different things. You have to make decisions about priorities throughout the piece. In terms of if you have your multiple audio tracks and you're trying to mix them together, you have to decide for any given portion of the piece which of those audio tracks is most important. And usually it's going to be one. Usually it's either going to be a dialogue track for a certain part, or in other parts it may be ambiance. It just depends on that part of the piece, and it can go back and forth and switches around. So The main thing that I find is that, especially when I'm mixing dialogue with other ambiances, or with ambiance or other sounds, maybe there's some music, maybe there's some ambiance, and then dialogue. When there's dialogue, almost always the dialogue will trump the other things. But what I do is, instead of just reducing or pulling the fader back on the other tracks, the ambiance and the music, or music, what I like to do is I like to actually use EQ to carve out part of the music or the ambiance, so it still seems very present, but it doesn't at the same time compete with the dialogue. So dialogue will usually sit in between. The majority of dialogue sits in the kind of the mid-range. So I would say around 2 kilohertz. Yeah, one or 2 kilohertz. Probably 1 kilohertz is where the center of it is. But if I can take the ambiance, for example, and create a kind of a big EQ cut in the middle of the ambiance, I'll still get a lot of that ambiance, but it won't compete as much with the dialogue, so I don't have to pull the fader back as much on the other things. So that's one kind of technique that you can use when you're mixing all of the different pieces together, so that they still stay present, but they don't compete as much. And so you just want to carve pieces out of each of them so that they can all kind of live happily together on a single mix track, and you can still hear the most important elements, but you don't lose the secondary elements. So that's kind of my general approach to mixing. And I did a piece fairly recently, just the post-production on a piece fairly recently for a commercial project, and that's exactly what I did. So we had music. The music was sort of the intro, and then it kind of had to fade behind a bunch of dialogue, and then at the end it came back up as well. So that was my main strategy. So that first portion, it was the music kind of at full. The fader was at 0. Then I pulled the fader down some, and I only had to pull it down by probably 6 dB or something like that. And I also applied that EQ where I cut out kind of the center portion, centered around maybe 1 or 2 kilohertz. I don't remember exactly in that case, but you just move it back and forth until it feels right or sounds right. And that did a really, really nice job. I'll also take your question as sort of a vote for the future. If you want to learn more about this in the future, and so we will talk more about this in the future. So thanks for that question, Eddie. All right, now next question here from Greg Palmer. Hey, Curtis, great discussion this week. Next time, can you discuss how to convert balanced to unbalanced signals and converting unbalanced to balance? I've had some problems in the past matching house mixer output to my Zoom F8 input. As I look back on it now, I'm thinking the house mixer was producing stereo unbalanced output, and the F8 was treating it like balanced input, resulting in the F8 seeing nothing. So what do you do when given an unbalanced source and the mixer is wanting balanced input? Then just the opposite, what do you do when something needs an unbalanced signal from the mixer that has only balanced output? All right, that's a potentially complex one. Let's switch over here. And again, rather than get into all the gory details, let me just give you a resource here that could hopefully be pretty helpful. Over on Wikipedia, there's an entry for balanced audio. First of all, for those that don't understand what balanced audio is, or balanced, I guess really, a balanced signal chain is probably the technically the right thing to call it. So what this refers to is that balanced audio connections use a number of techniques, and the main idea is to be able to run longer runs of cable and make them so that they are a little bit more immune to potential interference and noise. So there are a variety of techniques, and I won't get into all the gory details, but a balanced cable is usually going to have 3 poles. It's going to have, like for example, an XLR cable has 3 pins for audio, or a TRS cable, which is, the large phono plug. Looks like same thing you have on your professional headphones. Tip, ring, and sleeve. Again, a 3-pole connector, and the cable has 3 conductors in it, or at least 2 conductors and a shield. So the idea is that it's able to, when it picks up some noise, it's able to reject it. Now, the devices on both sides, say for example, if you are going to do a balanced audio chain or signal chain, the devices on both sides have to be balanced for it to truly be a balanced connection. So, for example, most microphones with XLR outputs we're sending a balanced signal, and on one pin they're sending the audio, on another pin they're sending the same audio except with the phase inverted. And without getting too technical, the receiving end on the other side of the cable also has to know, okay, this is a balanced input, so they're going to take that information and be able to eliminate the noise that's picked up. So in any case, that's the idea. So if you are in a situation where you have an unbalanced source and you need to send it to a balanced source, an unbalanced source, and you're sending it to something that's going to receive that signal, but it needs to be balanced on the receiving end. So this is a pretty common thing in live music. For example, a lot of instruments will have an unbalanced output from the instrument, and it's usually a TS or a TRS cable. It's actually usually a TS cable, so it's like this, except it's only 2-pole. It'll have a tip and a sleeve. And what they typically do for those is up on stage, the musician will have a DI box. And what a DI box is it allows them to plug that 1/4 inch plug into it, and then it converts it in there to a balanced signal, and then from there you run an XLR to the mixer. So that's one thing you can do if you're getting unbalanced to balanced. You can use a DI box. Now the inverse. What if you have a balanced signal and you need to go into an unbalanced on the receiving end? Actually, before we move on to that, let me go back to your question, because you actually talk about some other things here. Sennheiser G3 wireless hop discussion, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Turns out that the G3 transmitter input is a hybrid unbalanced input. Tip is mic level, ring is line level, sleeve is ground. And then, of course, remote audio makes a cable that designed for feeding a G3 from a mixer, such as a Sound Devices or a Zoom, that accounts for this hybrid connector. You could run into problems if you attempted to feed the mixer line level balanced output directly into the G3 input without accounting for the G3 hybrid input connection. I'm curious if you could get away with it given the G3 mic max input voltage, 1.7 volts, is almost at a line level, but probably more of a concern would be what happens internal to the G3 when there is a balanced signal on the mic and line connectors simultaneously. I'm a little reluctant to experiment and find out, as the G3 may go up in a cloud of smoke, but if you know someone that has lots of courage, it would be an interesting experiment. I'll open up that to the audience. If you have one or you know, please leave something down in the comments below. That'd be very helpful. So it's a big topic, Greg. Here's something interesting too. On the Rode Link, which is the wireless system I'm currently using, I believe that's a mic level output signal from the receiver. Rode makes a VXLR connector or adapter, which actually takes the TRS output from the Rode Link receiver and converts it to XLR. I bring that into the F8 or to the sound devices with no problems whatsoever. So I'm taking that into a mic level input though. So I presume that it's an unbalanced signal and I'm putting it into a balanced input. Not 100% sure on that. So this is to be honest, this is an area that's a little bit vague to me. When I have recorded to my sound devices and to my Zoom F8 from a mixer, say for example at a live concert or a live show of some sort, I have always gotten balanced outputs from the mixer, so I didn't have a problem bringing it in any case. So that's a topic, to be honest, I need to learn more about. I don't know all the answers, but I would definitely guide you over to this article as a starting point at Wikipedia on balanced audio. So hopefully that's helpful to you. And thank you for the question. All right, next question is from Vinny Ness. Hi, Curtis, I'm Vinny Ness. I recently bought your course, Production Sound Fundamentals for Film and Video. Last year, me and my friends began to create some short movies and film weddings, and then he gives a link there. We're living in Brazil. The audio is primarily in Portuguese, so thank you for sending this, Vinny. My question is about post-production. There are one guy responsible for the audio, that's him, another guy responsible for the video, that's his friend, and we have a big problem about how to proceed to post-production in the cinema or in the TV. I don't know if the way we do it is right, but we do it in this way. First, I send all the audio files, and my friend does the cuts on the video using the audio non-processed or edited. Then he sends me one audio file, then I apply the effects and resend to him to export the video. Thanks for the help. Sorry for the English. Vinny, that is a great question. And there are a lot of different workflows, possible workflows. Typically what happens in larger productions, just to kind of give you a little context first, usually the sound recordist or mixer will record the sound, and they'll record a couple of things all in one big file. So they'll record each of the individual microphones to separate tracks, or separate channels within a track. Then they will also record a stereo mix. So if you open up that file in, say, for example, Adobe Audition or Pro Tools or whatever digital audio workstation you're using, the file would have a whole bunch of tracks. The first two would be the stereo left and right, so that would be a mix of all the microphones on the left and right channels. Then you would have a series of isolated tracks, which would be each of the separate microphones that got recorded. And typically what will happen on a larger production is that the sound files will be given to the video editor or the picture editor. They will take just those first two channels, the left and right channels of the stereo mix, and they will sync those up to the video clips. They'll do their edit, and then they will send the entire thing over to the audio post team, or in this case, it'd be you. So usually they send over, they can come in a couple of different formats. There's OMF, and there are some others as well, but let's, for the sake of this argument, or this discussion, let's talk about OMF. So OMF is a file that shows, that essentially is like it's a big data file that not only will have the pictures, attached to it, will say, here's where all the picture edits took place, here's all the sound that came over with it. Then on the larger productions, again, they will try to use that stereo track if they can, but if they can't, they will go back to the original audio file and they'll pull the isolated microphone track and replace that stereo track for that particular microphone. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. That's probably, I don't know if that's the level of work that you guys want to do, but the workflow that you mention here could be perfectly legitimate, not a problem at all. So a lot of times short independent films will work is that there will be a sound recordist on the set, of course, recording all the sound. They will then give all of those audio clips to the director or producer or whomever is collecting it all at the end of the shoot. They will take all of that and they will just sync that up to the video clips, and then either they will handle the sound post-processing themselves, or they'll hand it off again, either as a Premiere project, as an Avid project, whatever. They could either give the whole project over to whoever's going to do the sound post, or they could export some sort of XML file like an OMF that would just have all the information on where all the edits took place, and then the sound post person would take care of it from there. But what you described is really, it sounds like you're getting a single audio file for the entire film. That can be fine too. If that's working for you guys, that's totally legitimate. It's a lot less work than the other workflows I'm talking about here. So if it's working well and you guys are getting the results you want in terms of the overall audio, then I think that's a perfectly legitimate, fairly efficient, less intensive type of workflow to use. So totally fine. So hopefully that gives you some sort of insight into how the various workflows can work. And again, like you said, or like I said, I think your workflow is perfectly legitimate if you're getting the results you want. If not, you may want to look at something a little bit more involved where you actually drop in some of the isolated tracks, if you're recording those, from the different microphones and replace those in post. Usually they only do that when it's needed. So in any case, so there's a little bit of some thoughts there on the overall workflow for sound post. All right, so that is the extent of the questions this week. You guys are starting to get, Greg in particular, you're starting to get questions that I don't know all the answers to, which is absolutely fantastic. It means you're out there doing some things that are challenging, and I apologize that I don't have all the answers, but hopefully we can learn some of that stuff together. So thanks again for that. Now, some quick thoughts on production versus post-production and sound. There was a question, and I'll leave a link for this new episode I just posted. There's a guy over on YouTube, one of my friends. His name is he goes by The Basic Filmmaker. That's his brand and his channel. And he said, hey, can you help me out with my sound? I want to see if there's anything I can do to make this sound better without being too intensive and too involved and requiring tons of post-processing. But show me what you do in Audition, and I'll just send you an audio clip. You do your magic in Audition, and then let's see what we get. So he sent me over a clip, and it was very clear from the start that he was working in a very small room with lots of reverberation and some, there was kind of this interesting kind of mid to low frequency resonance in the whole room. It was like the whole room was just sort of singing every time he talked. And then he also talked about mouth clicks, when a lot of times you'll notice people will start a phrase and they'll sort of have this click at the start, like that. That's not uncommon. And there are lip smacks, there are those clicks, pops, in all this kind of stuff that happens in the mouth that a lot of times when you're trying to do a really, really nice piece in terms of quality, you'll want to get rid of that stuff. And so we walked through. That is something you can do very, very well in Audition, and I'll have a new segment that'll be uploaded to the post-processing course here in the next little bit that shows you how to very quickly and easily do that in Audition. There was a segment that was originally and is still in the course. It's a little bit more time-consuming than this new method I'll show, so that'll be coming here in the next couple of weeks. But I showed how to do that in this episode, and then I'll leave a link to this. But the biggest thing that he could do to improve his sound is use sound blankets during production, during the recording. So make things easier on yourself. As painful as it seems during production to actually bring sound blankets and have to haul those things around and find a way to hang them up, it can help a lot. And to be honest, a lot of what you can do to really help is actually just putting the sound blanket on the floor underneath the talent. If you're booming a boom mic correctly, you'll have it boomed up above and pointed down at a 45-degree angle at your talent, just out of the frame like that. And what that means is that what your mic is picking up is picking up the sound bubble in front of your talent, plus whatever sound may be reflecting off of the floor and coming up behind the talent. So if you put a sound blanket down underneath your talent, especially if you're recording somewhere where there's a hard floor, hard surface, that can actually absorb a lot of that sound before it reflects off the floor and into the mic. So you can actually eliminate a lot of the reverberation. So if you don't have a way or a convenient way to hang up a sound blanket, that's something worth trying. And that takes away a lot of the excuses that most of us have, including myself. So definitely something worth trying. Another problem with sound blankets, and I learned this from my friend Scott Vanderbilt just recently on a shoot that we did here in the Salt Lake area. And actually, I didn't learn it till the end of the day, and it was kind of in a rush, and but I brought some sound blankets. We didn't end up using them, but I had just folded them up and hauling them around. They started, those are heavy. Those blankets are really, really heavy, and they're bulky and they're awkward. And as I was carrying them around, they were flopping all over the place. And at the end of the day, we had kind of loaded everything out onto a sidewalk, and I ran to go get the car, and I got back to the car, and he helped me load everything in. And he had actually folded up the sound blankets or rolled them up in a way that was really clever. So we will have an episode coming up here in the next little bit here that shows how to do that. What was clever about that, or was so helpful about that, is that it then made them very easy to carry. And it was really interesting because they were so much more compact, easy to hold on to, and it almost seemed like they were half the weight they had been before. Of course, they weren't, but just because they were so much easier to hold on to, it made the whole process of hauling and schlepping them around much easier, and took away another excuse for why many of us choose not to bring those with us when we go on a shoot. So there's something to consider as well. Do things in production that will make things a lot easier for you in post-production. And to be honest, when it comes to reverberation, there are some de-reverberation plugins available out there. RX from Isotope has a very good one. There's another one from Acon Digital called Deverberate, which is actually quite good as well. But the reality is, you will never get it sounding as good and as clean and reverb-free in post as you could with a good placement of some sound blankets. That's my personal opinion. So definitely better to get it right in production than have to fix it in post-production. So there's some thoughts. Hope those are helpful for you. Thanks for everyone's questions. Thanks for any input anyone can give on, especially Greg's questions about balanced versus unbalanced, and kind of interfacing between the two. We will have another session next week. Hope this was helpful for you. Talk to you again soon.